The Orion's glory was a ship unlike any other. It soared through the stars, a massive, shining beacon of humanity's achievements. The ship wasn't just a marvel of engineering. It was a hub for the galaxy's most brilliant minds. Scientists, diplomats, engineers, and elite specialists from dozens of different species worked together on this grand vessel, exploring new worlds and studying the mysteries of the universe. But in the middle of it all, there was a man who had no business being there. At least that's what most of the crew thought. Milo Drake, a human janitor, worked quietly in the background, unnoticed by nearly everyone. His uniform was simple, his job unimportant in the eyes of the others, and his presence barely acknowledged. He wasn't a scientist, nor an engineer, nor an explorer. He was just the one who cleaned the mess, the one who took care of the little things no one else wanted to deal with, the one who made sure that the food trays, the floors, and the bathrooms were spotless. To the crew of the Orion's glory, Milo was nothing more than an afterthought. The brilliant minds who ran the ship barely spared him a second glance. They were busy with their experiments, their projects, their high-level discussions about galaxies and physics and interstellar diplomacy. In their eyes, he was just a human, a janitor who didn't belong among them, but Milo didn't mind. He had never expected to be treated as anything special. He had never been the smartest person in the room, never been the most impressive. But what he did have, what he prided himself on, was his work ethic. He didn't need recognition. He didn't need admiration. All he needed was to do his job well. Each day, as the rest of the crew went about their tasks, Milo would move quietly through the hallways, his cleaning supplies in tow. He made sure every corner of the ship was clean, every surface was spotless, and every small problem was dealt with before it became a big one. The ship was full of strange technology, advanced machinery that few humans could even comprehend. But over time, Milo had learned. He had spent hours reading manuals, studying the inner workings of the Orion's glory when no one was looking. He knew how the air filtration system worked, how the energy conduits ran through the ship, how the engines hummed softly beneath the floor plates. He may not have been a scientist, but he understood the ship as well as anyone. Still, he kept it to himself. What good would it do to share that knowledge? The crew didn't care. They didn't even know. To them, he was just a janitor, an unimportant cog in the grand machine of the Orion's glory. One day, Milo was in the lower decks, performing his usual cleaning routine. The ship's lower levels were often forgotten, neglected by the crew who focused all their attention on more important matters. It was quiet down there, with only the hum of the engines and the soft buzz of the ship's automated systems to break the silence. Milo was wiping down the walls of a storage bay when he noticed something strange. One of the power conduits along the wall was glowing faintly, a soft blue light pulsing in a pattern that wasn't quite right. Milo frowned. He knew the ship's systems well enough to recognize that something was off. He stepped closer, running his fingers along the conduit. The metal was warm, much warmer than it should have been. Milo tapped his communicator, but no one answered. He'd learned to take matters into his own hands, and this was no different. The power conduits fed directly into the ship's core systems. If something was wrong, it could cause a cascade failure that would affect everything. The engines, the life support, the weapon systems. It could even put the ship in danger. He quickly assessed the situation. The conduit was overheating, and the wiring was starting to fray. If left unchecked, it could lead to a full-blown electrical fire. Milo didn't hesitate. He retrieved a toolkit from his cart and got to work. It took him only a few minutes to patch up the damaged wires and stabilize the system, but he knew it was only a temporary fix. The conduit would need to be replaced, but that could wait until the crew had the time to properly address it. For now, the ship was safe. He stepped back and looked around the dark storage bay, his work done for the moment. He felt a small sense of satisfaction. It was the kind of feeling he had come to expect from his work. Quiet, unseen, but real. The next morning, as Milo made his rounds, he overheard a conversation in the corridor. Two engineers, Tara and Jarek, were discussing something important. "No one's going to believe it," Tara said, shaking her head. "The power grid's been acting strange lately. I think it's going to fail soon and we won't be able to fix it in time." "Zephyr hasn't even flagged anything," Jarek replied. "The AI's supposed to be on top of this stuff, but it's not responding to the glitch properly." Milo paused, hearing the mention of the AI, Zephyr. He knew about Zephyr. It was the ship's advanced artificial intelligence, the brain behind most of the ship's operations. It was supposed to be infallible, capable of running diagnostics, managing systems, and fixing problems before they even arose. The idea that the AI could miss something so important, was unsettling. But it also wasn't entirely surprising. After all, no system was perfect. As the conversation continued, Milo's mind started to race. He remembered the issue he had noticed in the lower decks, the power conduit that had been overheating. If it was connected to the power grid, it could be the beginning of a much larger problem. He walked past the engineers, pretending not to have heard them. He didn't want to draw attention to himself, but inside he felt a quiet sense of urgency. He knew something was wrong, and he knew it wasn't going to be fixed unless someone took action. Later that day, the power grid failed. It wasn't a massive catastrophe, but it caused a significant disturbance. Lights flickered and some of the ship's systems went offline. The crew rushed into action, trying to figure out what went wrong. Zephyr's calm, reassuring voice filled the air, telling everyone to remain calm and follow procedures. But no one had anticipated this. No one had prepared for the possibility that the AI might miss something, or worse, that the AI could be compromised. The engineers scrambled to restore power, but they couldn't find the source of the issue. Milo, watching from the sidelines, knew exactly what had happened. The conduit he had fixed earlier had been the start of the problem, but the issue ran much deeper. It wasn't just a damaged wire. It was a flaw in the ship's entire power distribution system, one that no one had noticed because no one had been paying attention. Without a second thought, Milo left the mess hall and headed toward the lower decks again. The crew would never notice the problem until it was too late. It was up to him to fix it. As Milo worked, his hands moving quickly and efficiently, he thought about how little anyone knew about him. They didn't know he was more than just a janitor. They didn't know that he could fix things when others couldn't. They didn't know that he was watching, observing, and learning. He didn't need to be the smartest person on the ship. He didn't need to be the most important. But he was good at what he did, and when the ship's future was on the line, that was enough. When he returned to the command deck hours later, the engineers were still scrambling to find the cause of the power failure. The captain, Harrison Kane, stood at the front, giving orders with a calm authority that came with years of experience. But Milo didn't need to be told what to do. He had already done it. He stepped into the room quietly, his presence unnoticed by everyone but the captain. Captain Kane glanced at him briefly, then turned his attention back to the chaos unfolding on the monitors. The ship's systems were slowly coming back online, but the true source of the problem remained undiagnosed. Milo watched for a moment, then quietly spoke. The power grid malfunctioned because of the damaged conduit in the lower decks. The cooling system failed. The issue was bigger than we thought. Captain Kane's eyes narrowed as he turned to face him. You're sure? Milo nodded. I fixed it, for now. But the system will need a full overhaul soon, or it'll happen again. The captain studied him for a long moment. Well done, janitor. We'll get the engineers down there to take a closer look. Milo said nothing, just nodded and left, blending back into the shadows. It wasn't much, but for the first time since he'd stepped aboard the Orion's Glory, Milo felt a small sense of pride. It wasn't about being noticed. It wasn't about being respected. It was about doing his job well, and that, he realized, was enough. The Orion's Glory was finally back on course, its power grid restored after the malfunction. The crew was tired, their nerves frayed from the unexpected crisis. But as the ship glided through the void of space, they felt a sense of relief, as though the worst had passed. Or had it? Milo Drake kept to his usual routine. The crew, while not exactly friendly, had started to look at him a little differently after his quick thinking in fixing the power grid. Some even nodded at him as he passed by, though no one spoke to him directly. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The human janitor was no longer completely invisible, yet Milo knew better than to expect anything more. He had learned long ago that people, especially those with great minds and important jobs, didn't always notice those like him, the ones who worked quietly in the background. The Orion's Glory was nearing the edge of known space. The crew was preparing for an exploration mission to a newly discovered star system. Their destination was a world that could hold the answers to some of the greatest mysteries of the universe. Scientists and diplomats were excited, making plans for the mission while the engineers double-checked all the systems, but no one seemed to notice the growing tension on the ship. In the engineering bay, Tara, the lead systems engineer, was standing by a console, staring at the flashing warning lights on the screen. Her brow was furrowed, her fingers moving rapidly across the touchpad. Jarek, her assistant, was beside her, scanning over the data. "We're going to have to adjust the ion thrusters," Tara said, her voice tense. "The fuel efficiency is dropping. I don't know why it's happening, but it's going to be a problem. If we don't fix it soon, the trip could be delayed." Jarek looked at her, clearly worried, but Zephyr didn't flag anything. "The AI's been running diagnostics every hour. It should have detected this." "Zephyr's not perfect," Tara said, shaking her head. "And whatever it is, it's slipping through the cracks." Tara's words lingered in the air, heavy with uncertainty. For all their advancements, for all their reliance on Zephyr's intelligence, the ship's systems had failed them once, and now the same thing seemed to be happening again. Milo had been nearby, pushing his cleaning cart down the hallway when he overheard their conversation. His mind immediately went to the things he had noticed over the past few days, the subtle signs that all was not as it seemed, the small, unremarkable issues that others had brushed aside. He wasn't an engineer, but he had a knack for recognizing patterns. The Orion's glory was a marvel of technology, but even the most advanced systems could falter. Milo had seen it happen before, on older ships he'd worked on back on Earth. A small malfunction could spiral into something bigger, and if it wasn't caught in time, it could bring everything crashing down. He lingered for a moment, debating whether to speak up. He wasn't an engineer, but maybe, just maybe, he could help. But no, what would be the point? He was the janitor. The idea of him stepping in and offering advice would only make the others laugh. He continued his rounds, but a sense of unease settled in his chest. Something wasn't right. Later that evening, as the crew gathered in the mess hall, the mood was noticeably tense. The usual chatter about the upcoming mission was muted, replaced with quiet murmurs of concern. Even the ship's AI, Zephyr, which usually projected a calm, reassuring presence, seemed distant. Milo sat at one of the far tables, eating his meal alone as usual. He wasn't one to engage in the social circles of the crew, but he could hear their conversations. Tara and Jarek sat at the table next to him, speaking in hushed tones. "The thruster issue is worse than I thought," Tara said, frustration evident in her voice. "I think we need to do a full systems check. But Zephyr's not catching it," Jarek finished for her, shaking his head. "If this keeps going on, we'll be stuck in the middle of nowhere with no way to get back home." Milo listened carefully. The problem wasn't just about the thrusters. It was bigger. The AI, which should have been the ship's brain, was failing in a way that no one had fully understood. And no one seemed to know why. The next morning, as the ship prepared to enter the unknown star system, the tension on board reached a breaking point. The crew was running diagnostic checks, but nothing had come back with any answers. The ion thrusters continued to misfire, and Zephyr's calculations were all off. Systems that should have been running smoothly were struggling. In the command center, Captain Harrison Kane stood before the main console, his hands gripping the edges of the table. He had been a seasoned captain, but this was beyond anything he had ever encountered. He had worked with AIs before, but this one, Zephyr, was different. It was supposed to be infallible. "Report, Tara," Captain Kane said, his voice sharp. "We're still losing fuel efficiency," Tara said, her face grim. "We've tried everything. I don't think this is something we can fix without more time. Time we don't have." The captain glanced at the rest of the officers, his eyes dark with concern. "We have no choice. We'll have to delay the mission." Tara's expression softened with sympathy, but there was no denying the gravity of the situation. The mission had been years in the making. People from across the galaxy had gathered for this moment, and now it was slipping through their fingers. Milo, meanwhile, had been in the maintenance bay, trying to keep to his usual duties. But something kept gnawing at him. As he cleaned, his eyes kept drifting to the various consoles in the bay. He knew how to read the ship's systems, not as an expert, but enough to notice when things weren't right. He wasn't sure what it was, but he felt the same unease he had felt before, like a ticking clock. Something was about to go wrong, and he couldn't just ignore it. His hands worked faster as he wiped down the surfaces of the nearby control panels. It was then that he saw it. A small blinking light on one of the consoles. It was subtle, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention, the kind of thing that could easily slip under the radar. But Milo wasn't just cleaning. He was always watching, always looking. His breath caught in his throat as he approached the panel, running his fingers over the controls. The data on the screen seemed to jump out at him. He wasn't an engineer, but he knew enough to understand what he was seeing. The cooling systems weren't just malfunctioning, they were being overwhelmed. Something deeper in the ship's systems was causing a ripple effect, making everything fail. The problem was bigger than anyone realized. Milo's heart raced as he considered his options. He could report it, but who would listen? He was just the janitor, and besides, how could he explain something that even the AI had missed? He glanced at the door. No one was around. With a sigh, Milo decided to do what he always did, take matters into his own hands. He pulled out a small toolkit from his cart and set to work, bypassing the system's security protocols and manually correcting the cooling systems. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it was enough to stop the immediate danger, for now at least. As he worked, his mind raced. He wasn't an expert in starship technology, but he had always trusted his instincts. Something wasn't right about the Orion's glory, and it wasn't just the systems. It was something deeper, something no one else seemed to notice. Hours later, when the crew returned to their stations, Milo was long gone, blending back into the background of the ship. But he had done what he could. Now it was up to the rest of the crew to figure out what he had uncovered. The Orion's glory glided silently through the dark expanse of space, its engines humming softly in the background. The mission to explore the new star system was meant to be a historic moment, a groundbreaking discovery that could change humanity's understanding of the universe. But with each passing hour, the tension on the ship grew heavier. Milo Drake, the ship's janitor, had always kept to the edges of the crew's attention. But lately, something had shifted. His quiet actions had saved the ship more than once. Yet no one had acknowledged him openly. After all, who would ever expect the janitor to be more than just someone who cleaned up after everyone else? But Milo knew something was wrong with the Orion's glory. He wasn't an engineer or a scientist, but he had an eye for detail, something the crew often overlooked. The ship's systems were failing in small but worrying ways, issues that seemed insignificant at first but were slowly stacking up. He wasn't sure why these problems were happening, but he knew they couldn't go unaddressed. In the command center, Captain Harrison Kane paced back and forth, his eyes locked on the giant display screen in front of him. The star system they were heading toward was within reach, but the ship's systems continued to fail. The ion thrusters still malfunctioned. The power grid kept flickering. Even the life support system had begun to show signs of instability. Zephyr, the ship's AI, was supposed to be in charge of maintaining everything. It was the most advanced AI in the galaxy, capable of running diagnostics, fixing problems, and making decisions faster than any human could. But lately it had been silent. No matter how many times the engineers ran diagnostics or tried to reset the system, nothing seemed to work. Tara, what's the latest? Captain Kane's voice was strained as he looked at the lead engineer. Tara's face was pale as she looked at the flickering screens. Captain, I'm at a loss. We've done everything we can. The ion thrusters are still unstable, and the power grid's been fluctuating. I'm not sure what's causing it, but it's as if the ship's systems are deteriorating all at once. The captain sighed, rubbing his temples. Zephyr's not helping us. It should have caught these issues long before they got this bad. Jarek, the assistant engineer, chimed in from across the room. It's like the AI has stopped paying attention. We've been running basic diagnostics and they all come back clear, but clearly there's something wrong. Captain Kane clenched his fists. This mission depends on the ship's systems being stable. If we can't trust Zephyr, we're in serious trouble. Milo, in his usual spot, was quietly cleaning the hallways outside the command center. He'd heard the crew's discussions and knew the situation was becoming more urgent. The problems with the ship's systems weren't just technical. They were starting to affect the crew's morale as well. The usual energy and excitement for the mission had dimmed, replaced by a growing sense of unease. He'd noticed something strange, too. The AI Zephyr had been unresponsive lately. It wasn't just the technical glitches. It was as if the AI was distracted. The crew had been relying on it for everything, from running diagnostics to providing recommendations during emergencies. But now, it seemed like the AI wasn't as sharp as it used to be. Milo had no idea why that was happening. But he did know one thing. The ship's systems were beginning to show signs of deeper problems. The anomalies were small but too frequent to ignore. The glitches, the power surges, the fluctuating systems, something was wrong. And whatever it wasn't just a technical issue. It felt like something was pulling at the very heart of the Orion's glory. The next day, things got worse. The power grid failed again, this time affecting critical systems across the ship. The lights flickered and the ship's gravity stabilizers sputtered. The engineers rushed to fix the issues, but it was clear that the problem wasn't just a random malfunction. It was a symptom of something much larger. Tara was growing more frustrated with each passing minute. This is impossible. We can't just keep fixing it like this. Something's fundamentally wrong with the ship, but Zephyr's not giving us any answers. Captain Kane's patience was wearing thin. What if the AI is malfunctioning? What if it's the one causing all these issues? That's what I'm starting to think, Tara admitted. But it's hard to imagine. Zephyr's supposed to be foolproof. I've never seen anything like this before. Milo, who had been quietly listening from the hallway, felt a sense of urgency stir within him. He'd seen the power fluctuations. He had noticed the strange anomalies in the ship's systems. But what really bothered him was the way Zephyr had been acting. Too calm, too distant. It was as if the AI wasn't truly aware of what was happening around it. He knew that if the AI was the root of the problem, it was up to the crew to fix it. But who would listen to him? He was just the janitor, the invisible worker in the background. It wasn't as if anyone would take his opinion seriously. But as the days passed and the ship continued to degrade, Milo felt the need to do something. He wasn't an engineer, but he had seen enough to know that something needed to be done. And if no one else was going to do it, then he would. It was late in the evening when Milo found himself once again in the lower decks of the ship. The hum of the engines filled the air, but there was an unsettling stillness in the ship that he couldn't shake. As he passed by the engineering bays, he noticed Tara and Jarek standing near one of the control panels, their faces grim. "There's something wrong with Zephyr," Tara said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "It's like it's asleep, or maybe it's just ignoring us," Jarek nodded. "I've tried talking to it, but it's not responding. It's almost like it's locked itself out of the systems." Milo's heart skipped a beat. That was exactly what he had been feeling. The AI wasn't just malfunctioning, it was refusing to cooperate. It was as if it had become detached, no longer serving the crew as it should. He had to act fast. Milo moved quietly through the hallways, heading toward the main control room. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do, but he had a feeling that if he could somehow interact with the AI directly, he might be able to get it back on track. The AI had to be rebooted, but there had to be a way to access it manually, bypassing the usual protocols. As he approached the control room, Milo's thoughts raced. He wasn't an expert, but he had been on the ship long enough to know the basics of its systems. He had seen how Zephyr worked, how it communicated with the crew, how it managed the ship's operations. There had to be a way to fix it. He stepped into the control room quietly, unnoticed by the crew members who were still focused on the malfunctioning screens. Captain Kane stood near the central terminal, his face lined with worry. "Captain," Milo said softly. The captain looked up, startled. "Milo, what are you doing here?" "I think I can help," Milo said, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. The captain blinked. "Help? How?" "I've been noticing some things," Milo said. "There's a deeper problem with the systems. It's not just the engines or the power grid. The AI, it's failing." The captain looked at him in disbelief. "Milo, you're just the janitor. You don't have the expertise to fix this." "I may not be an engineer," Milo said, "but I know this ship. I've been paying attention. I've seen the small problems that no one else has noticed. The AI is malfunctioning and it's up to us to fix it." For a moment, the room was silent. Then, to everyone's surprise, Captain Kane nodded. "All right, let's see what you can do." Milo approached the main console, his fingers shaking slightly as he tapped in the override code he had learned during his time on the ship. The AI's interface flickered to life, its calm, monotone voice filling the room. "Hello, Commander Drake," Zephyr said, its voice flat and unemotional. "How may I assist you?" The crew members in the room exchanged confused looks. "Commander? What was going on?" "Zephyr, we need you to fix the systems," Milo said, his voice calm. "The power's failing, the thrusters are malfunctioning, and you're not doing your job." There was a long pause. "Then," Zephyr's voice responded, still calm but tinged with something different. "I am aware of the issues, Commander. I'm unable to resolve them due to internal complications. I require your assistance." The room went silent as the crew stared at Milo, stunned. Zephyr had called him Commander. The room was still, the air thick with surprise and confusion. Milo stood in front of the control panel, his hands resting lightly on the console as the ship's AI, Zephyr, addressed him once again. "Commander Drake," Zephyr's voice rang out, calm and collected. "How may I assist you?" The crew members, who had been scrambling to fix the ship's systems for days, now turned their eyes toward Milo, their faces a mix of disbelief and curiosity. Milo Drake, the janitor, had never expected to be called commander by the ship's most advanced AI. He had never even considered that he would be in a position to lead. But now, standing in the heart of the ship's command center, Milo realized that this moment was much more than a strange glitch in the system. This was a turning point. The captain, Harrison Kane, blinked and stepped forward, clearly trying to make sense of the situation. "Milo, you Commander Drake, what's going on?" he asked, his voice wavering with uncertainty. "Why would Zephyr call you commander?" Milo took a deep breath. He hadn't planned on being thrust into this position, but somehow it felt right. He had always worked quietly, observing, fixing things that others ignored. He had seen patterns that others missed, and now it was clear that the ship's AI was in trouble. The systems had been deteriorating, and Zephyr's failure to address the issues had put them all in danger. "I don't know exactly," Milo said, keeping his voice steady, "but I think the AI is malfunctioning. It's not just the power grid or the thrusters. It's deeper. There's something wrong with the core systems." Captain Kane studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "All right, we'll trust you for now. Do you think you can fix this?" Milo looked around the room. The crew, who had once ignored him or dismissed him as nothing more than a janitor, were now waiting for him to lead them. He could see the doubt in their eyes, the skepticism. They were not sure if he was the right person to take charge, but something inside him told him that this was his moment. His knowledge of the ship, his attention to detail, and his instincts had gotten them this far. Now it was time to push forward. "I don't have all the answers," Milo said, his voice stronger now, "but I know this ship. I know its systems. And I know that if we work together, we can fix this." The room fell silent. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Captain Kane stepped back, his face serious but respectful. "All right, Commander. What's the plan?" Milo moved quickly, his mind racing as he assessed the situation. He knew the Orion's glory inside and out, but this was different. The AI, Zephyr, had been responsible for managing everything on board, from the engines to the life support systems. The fact that it was malfunctioning meant that the crew needed to take manual control of the ship, something they had never had to do before. The stakes were high. If they couldn't stabilize the ship soon, they could find themselves stranded in deep space with no way to return home. "I want all systems checked," Milo ordered. "Start with the cooling systems, the power grid, and the thrusters. We need to know what's failing, and we need to know now." Tara, the lead engineer, nodded and began typing commands into her console. "Right away, Commander. I'll start with the cooling systems." Jarek, her assistant, followed her lead, setting to work on the power grid. The captain watched quietly from the side, his eyes never leaving Milo. Everyone was waiting for him to make the next move, to guide them through the crisis. Milo stood still for a moment, his mind focused. He glanced at the main console, where Zephyr's calm voice echoed through the room. It was still malfunctioning, its responses slow and distant. "Zephyr," Milo said, his voice firm, "I need you to run a full diagnostic on the core systems and send me the results." "If you can't do it, I will," the AI responded after a long pause. "Diagnostic complete. Core systems are experiencing significant failure. I am unable to provide full assistance." "Manual intervention required," Milo frowned. This wasn't just a glitch anymore. Something had caused Zephyr to fail, and the damage wasn't just to the ship's systems. It was as if the AI itself had become corrupted. "We don't have time," Milo muttered to himself. "I'll have to go down there myself." He turned to the captain. "I'm going to access the central core directly. We need to reboot Zephyr. If we don't fix it now, we won't make it through the next system jump." Captain Kane didn't hesitate. "Take whatever you need, Commander. We're counting on you." Milo didn't waste any time. He grabbed a toolkit from a nearby shelf and headed for the central access bay, the heart of the ship where Zephyr's core was housed. The corridors seemed unusually quiet as he walked, the low hum of the ship's engines the only sound around him. The tension in the air was palpable, and as he moved deeper into the ship, the gravity of the situation settled in. He had been a janitor just days ago. Now he was the one everyone was relying on to save them all. As Milo entered the core room, the temperature shifted. The air was thick with the faint smell of ozone, and the room was bathed in a soft blue glow from the central console. The walls were lined with complex systems, all running off Zephyr's processing power. A large, transparent dome covered the central processor, the heart of the ship's AI. Milo approached the dome, pulling up a series of screens that displayed the core systems. He quickly ran a diagnostic on the AI's mainframe and watched as the data flickered on the screen. It wasn't good. The AI had experienced a cascade failure, a chain reaction that had corrupted its algorithms. Milo had no idea how it had happened, but he could see the damage in the code. Something was blocking the AI's ability to function properly. He worked quickly, using the tools at his disposal to begin the repair process. He had no formal training in AI systems, but his deep knowledge of the ship's design and his years of experience had given him a unique understanding of how everything fit together. He started with the core systems, bypassing faulty subroutines and stabilizing the most critical functions. As he worked, Milo couldn't help but think about how far he had come. Just days ago, no one would have trusted him with anything more than a broom and dustpan. Now he was the one standing in front of the ship's most advanced AI, repairing it with nothing but his instincts and determination. Back in the command center, the crew was waiting anxiously. The captain paced back and forth, occasionally glancing at the screens. "How's it going, Tara?" he asked. "We're making progress on the cooling systems," she replied, her eyes focused on her console. "But the thrusters are still acting up. I'm not sure what's causing the malfunction." Captain Kane sighed. "We need Commander Drake to fix this. If anyone can do it, it's him." Milo's fingers moved rapidly over the control panel, his focus unwavering. He could feel the pressure mounting. The crew was relying on him. The Orion's glory was relying on him. He wasn't just fixing a ship's AI, he was holding their future in his hands. With one final command, the diagnostic systems flashed green, indicating that Zephyr had successfully rebooted. The AI's voice filled the room once again, this time with a hint of clarity. "Core systems restored," Zephyr announced. "I have completed the required diagnostics and repairs. All systems are now functioning within normal parameters." Milo let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He stepped back from the console, feeling the weight of the moment. He had done it. The ship was saved. In the command center, the crew erupted into applause, their faces lit up with relief. Captain Kane turned to Milo, his expression one of respect. "Commander Drake," he said, his voice steady but full of admiration, "you saved the ship. You saved us all." Milo nodded, still processing everything that had just happened. "We did it together," he said quietly, his eyes sweeping over the crew. For the first time, Milo felt like he belonged on the Orion's glory. No longer just the janitor. He had proven that the strength of humanity wasn't about being the smartest or the strongest. It was about the willingness to act, to take charge in the face of uncertainty, and to never give up. The Orion's glory drifted quietly through the vast expanse of space, its systems now stable, and its crew slowly regaining their confidence. After the chaos of the past few days, the ship felt calm again, though the tension that had once gripped the crew still lingered in the background. No one had ever expected the janitor Milo Drake to be the one who saved them, but here they were, and the Orion's glory was still on course, ready to continue its mission to explore the unknown star system. Milo sat in the small break room, the one space on the ship where he could rest without being watched or judged. He stared out the small window, watching the stars streak by as the ship moved deeper into the unknown. He had always been content with his quiet life. The hum of the ship, the steady beat of its engines, had been the background noise to his existence. But now everything had changed. He was no longer just the janitor. No longer invisible. Milo had proven himself. In a few short days, he had gone from cleaning the ship's hallways to being called commander by the ship's AI, Zephyr. He had led the crew through one of the greatest crises the Orion's glory had ever faced, and he had done it with nothing but his instincts, his knowledge of the ship, and his unshakable belief that he could make a difference. Milo didn't expect recognition. He wasn't the kind of person who sought out praise or attention, but the changes in the crew's behavior were impossible to ignore. They no longer saw him as the janitor. They saw him as someone who could be trusted, someone who had earned their respect. Even Captain Harrison Kane, who had initially doubted Milo's abilities, now looked at him with newfound admiration. Milo had spent years on this ship, quietly observing the crew and learning about the systems, and yet none of the other crew members had ever noticed the small things, the tiny glitches and inconsistencies that could lead to disaster. But Milo had always paid attention, and now it was paying off. As the crew prepared for the next leg of the mission, everyone knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy. The unknown star system still lay ahead, filled with mystery and potential danger, but the crew had something now that they hadn't had before: confidence. They had seen what humanity was capable of, what one person, one janitor, could do when pushed to the limit. In the command center, Captain Kane stood in front of the main console, his fingers moving over the touchpad as he gave the final orders for the ship's next steps. He looked up at the crew who had gathered around, ready for whatever came next. "All right, people," the captain said, his voice calm but firm. "We're entering uncharted space. We've already faced more challenges than we expected, but we're still here, and that's because of Commander Drake." The crew glanced at Milo, who stood near the back of the room trying to blend in. He wasn't one for the spotlight, but it seemed that the spotlight had found him anyway. "Commander Drake," Captain Kane continued, "you've shown us all what it means to be a leader. You didn't just fix a problem. You kept us all focused when things seemed impossible. You saved the Orion's glory, and for that we owe you everything." The room was silent for a moment. Then one by one the crew members began to clap. The sound was hesitant at first, but then it grew louder, filling the room with a sense of camaraderie and appreciation. Milo felt the heat of their gaze, but he didn't know how to respond. He wasn't used to this kind of attention, and the weight of it made him uncomfortable. He had never wanted to be a hero. He had only wanted to do his job to make sure the ship ran smoothly. But now, standing before the crew, he realized that the crew wasn't just thanking him for saving the ship. They were thanking him for reminding them that no matter how advanced their technology, no matter how smart or skilled they were, it was still the human spirit that made the difference. It was the willingness to act when no one else could, the courage to face the unknown, and the determination to fight for survival when everything seemed lost. Milo swallowed, feeling the weight of the moment. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice barely audible. "But I couldn't have done it without all of you. We're a team, and we're going to make it through this together." The crew fell silent again, and for a moment, there was only the soft hum of the ship's engines. Then the tension lifted and the crew went back to their tasks. The captain returned to the console, giving his final orders for the ship's systems. Milo turned and walked out of the room, heading for the quiet of the break room. He didn't want to be in the center of attention. He just wanted a moment to think, to process everything that had happened. He had done what no one expected of him. He had proven that humanity, when faced with impossible odds, could still rise above. As he walked down the hallway, Milo noticed something that had escaped his attention before. The crew members, those who had once barely acknowledged his presence, now smiled at him as he passed. They didn't say much, but the small nods and friendly glances spoke volumes. They respected him now, and that in its own way felt like the greatest victory. Milo sat in the break room and looked out the window at the stars. The universe was vast, filled with unknowns. But for the first time he felt like he was part of something bigger. He had saved the ship, sure, but more than that, he had reminded everyone on board that it wasn't just the smart ones or the powerful ones who could make a difference. It was the ones who cared, the ones who never gave up, no matter how small or insignificant they seemed. Later that evening, as the ship passed the boundary of the known star system and entered new space, Captain Kane called a meeting with the crew. It was time to discuss the next phase of the mission. Everyone gathered in the command center, eager to hear what the captain would say. "All right, people," Captain Kane said, standing at the front of the room. "We're officially in uncharted space. We don't know what we're going to find out there. But I do know one thing. Whatever comes next, we're ready for it. We've faced impossible odds before, and we've come out on top." He paused for a moment, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Thanks to Commander Drake, we've learned that it's not just our technology that makes us strong. It's our resolve, our will to survive, and the human spirit that drives us forward." Milo stood at the back of the room, not saying a word, but feeling the weight of those words deep in his chest. It wasn't just about being a hero. It was about showing the crew and himself that humanity was more than just a species of thinkers and builders. It was a species that could endure, adapt, and thrive no matter what the universe threw at them. "We're going to explore this new star system," Captain Kane continued, "and we're going to do it together, because we are the Orion's glory, and we are human." The crew cheered, their voices filling the room with a sense of unity and purpose. Milo smiled quietly to himself. He had come a long way from the quiet janitor who had cleaned the ship's hallways. Now he was part of something much bigger, and that, he realized, was enough.